Remember Mia from 2.5 Men? Here's how she ended up. For a while, it looked like Charlie Harper had finally met the woman who could actually change him. Mia wasn't just another date, she was one of the few women Charlie seriously considered building a life with. But when I looked at what happened to the actress afterward, I realized her story had almost nothing to do with staying famous. The actress behind Mia was Emmanuelle Vaugier, and what surprised me most is how easily her career could be missed if you only remember her from 2.5 Men. Because she had already been working for years before she walked into Charlie's world. Vaugier was born in Vancouver, Canada, in 1976, and her path into acting wasn't exactly some perfectly planned Hollywood dream. She grew up in a French-speaking family, and early on, she found herself drawn toward performing. There was even a point when she worked as a model in Japan. Then came television. Small roles. Guest appearances. One project after another. And honestly, this is where her story gets interesting. She wasn't becoming famous overnight. She was becoming dependable. I remember seeing her in Smallville as Dr. Helen Bryce and realizing she had already developed a completely different screen presence from the woman we'd later know as Mia. She could play serious characters, darker characters, and people who weren't necessarily easy to figure out. Then came horror. She appeared in Saw 2 and later returned in Saw 4. And suddenly, she wasn't just a sitcom actress waiting for her next big opportunity. She was moving between completely different worlds. But then, in 2005, came the role most people still remember. Mia. A dance instructor who catches Charlie Harper's attention. And that's actually understating what happened. Charlie Harper, the man who treated commitment like a personal enemy, started thinking about marriage. That alone made Mia different. She wasn't just another woman passing through Charlie's bedroom. Their relationship lasted across multiple episodes and several seasons, and for a brief period, the show allowed us to imagine something almost strange for Charlie. Maybe he could actually settle down. I think that's why people remembered Mia. Not because she was the loudest character. Because she represented something Charlie almost never had, a real possibility of change. Of course, anyone who watched 2.5 Men knew better. The relationship eventually fell apart. Mia faded from the story. And if you stopped watching there, you could easily assume Emmanuelle Vaugier faded away too. She didn't. In fact, around that same era, she was doing something that sitcom viewers might not have noticed at all. She was playing Detective Jessica Angel on CSI, New York. That role gave her a completely different identity. She wasn't Charlie Harper's love interest anymore. She was a detective. And she stayed with the series from 2006 into 2009. That's one of the things I find fascinating about her career. She never seemed desperate to recreate Mia. She just kept moving. After CSI, New York, there were more television roles. She appeared in Lost Girl, taking on the darker character of Morgan. She also worked on shows including Mistresses, Covert Affairs, and Rogue. Then came guest appearances on recognizable series such as Supernatural and Hawaii 5-0. And eventually, she took on the role of Major and Frost on MacGyver. At that point, the pattern was pretty clear. Mia had become one chapter of a much longer career. And then I came across something that made that even clearer. Her life outside acting. Vaugier developed a serious interest in horseback riding and even competed in horse shows. That's not exactly the Hollywood after-party story you might expect. And she also became involved with animal welfare. She founded an event called Fluffball, which helped raise support for animal rescue and protection organizations. That part of her life really changed the way I looked at her career. Because she wasn't spending the years after 2.5 Men desperately trying to prove she was still relevant. She seemed to build a life that existed beyond television. She continued acting. She appeared at fan conventions. She stayed connected with audiences who remembered her from different stages of her career. And that's something we don't always notice with actors. We remember the one role that made them familiar to us. But they don't necessarily experience their own careers that way. For us, she's Mia. For Emmanuelle Vaugier, Mia was one stop along the road. There were detectives after that. Horror roles. Drama. Genre television. Guest appearances. Independent work. And years later, she's still associated with acting rather than with some dramatic Hollywood disappearance. That's probably the biggest twist in her story. She didn't disappear. She simply stopped being everywhere. And honestly, I think there's something refreshing about that. Not every actor who leaves the center of pop culture has fallen off the map. Sometimes they just build a quieter career, take different roles, develop interests outside Hollywood, and keep going without constantly needing the spotlight. So when you look back at Mia now, it's easy to think about Charlie Harper and that dance studio and wonder whatever happened to the woman who almost convinced him to settle down. But Emmanuelle Vaugier's story turned out to be much bigger than Mia. She kept working. She kept changing roles. She found passions outside acting. And while millions of viewers moved on to the next sitcom character, she quietly kept building a career. Maybe that's why her story stayed with me. Sometimes the people we think disappeared from Hollywood didn't disappear at all. We just stopped looking.